Hi class! Kumusta na kayo? Ang tagal na nating hindi nagle-lesson. So, welcome to our Module 4 sa Understanding Self, Unfolding the Mental Self. Ayan. So, marami tayong matututunan ngayon. Heads up lang, walang icebreaker itong mga lessons natin ngayon. Pero, meron kayong mga ititake na mga online na mga quizzes. Tapos, i-interpret natin sa susunod. Okay? So, let's start. So this will be our module 4. Yan. So section 1 will be cognition, memory, and intelligence. Yan, nakaka-relate kayo kasi di ba mga matatalinong bata kayo. So for section 1, our intended learning outcomes will be explain and elaborate concepts and processes on cognition, memory, and intelligence, analyze and demonstrate how cognition, memory, and intelligence are manifested in various aspects of their life, and identify the principles of cognition, memory, and intelligent presence in your own lives. So let's start with cognition. Ano ba yung cognition? Cognition is an important part of your being an individual. So nasa process siya ng development natin. It impacts kung ano yung behavior mo. At yung behavior, nakaka-impact din siya sa cognition. And it's how information from outside is taken in, analyzed, and processed. So cognition is kung paano pumapasok sa utak natin yung mga bagay-bagay like paano mo nakikita, naririnig yung boses ko ngayon, paano to ina-analyze ng utak mo, ito ba ay ingay o impormasyon, at paano pinaprocess or paano ini-store ng utak mo yung mga bagay na naririnig mo, nakikita mo, naaamoy mo, and so forth. So cognition is the process that includes thinking, pag-iisip, knowing, alam mo, remembering, pag-alala, judging, and problem solving. These are higher level function of the brain and encompasses language, imagination, perception, and planning. So may mga iba't ibang klase ng processes sa cognition. Unang-una is yung attention. Ito napaka-importante nito because it is the cognitive process that allows people to focus on a specific stimulus in an environment. So right now, while you are attending to my voice, kaya hindi ako naglalagay ng picture ko sa ngayon. Kasi I want you to attend to my voice. Sa boses ko lang, kung ano yung nasa screen, ano yung words doon. At kapag merong attention, ibig sabihin, nakaka-cancel out mo yung mga iba't ibang mga stimulus pa na nasa paligid. Hindi ka nagkakaroon ng attention or nawawala yung attention mo kung gaano kalamig or gaano kainit yung paligid ninyo ngayon at kung ano pa mang mga bagay ang nangyayari sa paligid mo. Pangalawa is language and language development. Bakit marunong kang mag-Tagalog? Bakit marunong kang Kapampangan, mag-English are also cognitive processes. So it involves the ability to understand and express thoughts through spoken and written words. So it allows us to communicate with others and plays an important role in our thought. So maraming mga tao, 'di ba, sa kakapanood natin ng mga Korean novela, naiintindihan na natin yung mga languages nila. Though hindi natin nagagawa yung written Hangul or Korean language, but most of us actually understand yung mga basic Korean phrases like annyeonghaseyo, kamsahamnida, kinsaneyo. So yan yung mga salita sa kakapanood natin. So, yung palang mga bagay na yun is part of our cognitive processes. And then next is perception. So, perception is different with sensation. Sensation is yung using our five senses, pero yung perception is how you see it. So, perception is a cognitive process that allows people to take in information through their senses. Yun nga yung sinabi ko kanina, sensation. Then, utilize this information to respond and interact with the world. So, kaya minsan, iba yung tingin mo, iba yung perception mo ng beauty dun sa mga kaklase mo kasi different yung views ninyo or different yung pag-process nun sa brain ninyo. Next is thought. It is an essential part of every cognitive process. Pag-iisip, it allows people to engage in decision making. Bakit yun ang pinili mong course? Bakit ito yung pinili mo na section? Or ito yung pinili mo na school is thoughtfully mo yan iniisip, syempre. Problem solving and higher reasoning. Then learning, medyo mas pag-aaralan natin to later on, and yung memory. So, let's talk about memory. Yan. So, unang tanong, ano yung kinain mo kahapon ng umaga? Nahirapan ka bang mag-isip? Malalaman natin yan kung bakit ka nahihirapan mag-isip. So, ano ba yung memory? Ayan, habang iniisip mo pa rin, ano nga ba kinain ko kahapon ng umaga? Yan. Memory is a major topic of interest in the field of cognitive psychology. So, however, how we remember kung bakit naaalala natin and what we remember and what we forget reveal a great deal about our cognitive processes. So, napakalaking bagay niyan kung bakit naaalala mo pa yung mga bagay na yon kasi meron niyang epekto sa iyong cognitive process. So, may mga iba't ibang klase ng memory, no? Meron tayong tinatawag na sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. According yan kay Atkinson and Schifrin. 1968, naging ano nila yan, research nila yan. So, let's go to sensory memory. Sensory memory, from the word itself, senses, so it's the memory or the earliest stage of our memory. During this stage, sensory information, tulad ng sinabi ko, from your eyes, from your ears, from your feeling of skin, yun yung mga bagay-bagay. So, yung mga information na yun for a brief period of time, no longer than half a second, for visual information, kaya mas mabilis pag nakikita, no? And 3 to 4 seconds for auditory information. So we attend to only certain aspect of this sensory memory, allowing some of this information to pass through the next, which is the short-term memory. So kumbaga, hindi lahat ng nararamdaman ng 5 senses natin at a certain number or a certain period ay nagpa-pass through dun sa next stage. Kaya nga importante yung attention. So kumbaga, kung alin lang yung nabibigyan mo ng atensyon, yun lang yung papasok sa next stage ng ating contest. Okay? So, pagpasok niya, pag nag-attend ka dito sa memory na ito, dun sa sensory memory, siya ay pupunta sa next level, which is the short-term memory. So, it's often interchangeably used with working memory. So, yung short-term memory is, from the word itself, short-term. So, malamang sa malamang, yung ating short-term memory or yung ating working memory, magla-last lang yan for 15 to 30 seconds. So, yung memory o yung pag-alala mo, kumbaga, pag nagka-cramp ka, tinignan mo yung katabi mo noon, di ba? In 15 to 30 seconds, kailangan maisulat mo yung sagot ng katabi mo, kung hindi, mawawala na yun kasi nasa short-term memory lang siya. Pero yung working memory, ang ibig sabihin nun, galing na siya doon sa dati mong storage, doon sa dati mong mga inorganize, tapos gagamitin mo siya. Yan. And then yung long-term memory. Yung long-term memory naman, ito yung continuing storage of information. Ito yung bakit naalala mo yung birthday, yung anniversary ninyo, yung monthsary ninyo, nakastore yan sa long-term memory. This information is largely outside our awareness. According nga kay Freud, ito yung unconscious natin, but can be called into the working memory. Pwede mo siyang tawagin. So, kumbaga, kung napanood nyo yung Inside Out, ito yung mga, di ba, kung napapansin nyo, meron siyang core memory. I'm encouraging you to actually watch Inside Out para ma-realize nyo kung ano yung ibig sabihin. Ito yung gagawin ko siyang movie review ninyo para dito sa ating module na ito. So some of this information is fairly easy to recall and while other memories are much more difficult to access. Kumbaga, kung tama yung storage mo or tama yung ginawa mo ng folder yung CUS or yung understanding the self sa iyong utak, hindi lang basta-basta ka bara-bara ka nagre-review, madali sa iyo na ma-retrieve yun papunta sa working memory kasi pag nasa working memory siya, madali mo siyang maisusulat. Hindi ang short-term memory, it doesn't mean na nasa short-term memory siya ay pupunta siya kaagad sa long-term memory. So may mga bagay-bagay na mananatili sila at mawawala na lang sila dun sa short-term memory. Pero meron namang mga bagay na nasa long-term memory, it doesn't mean na makakapunta siya sa working memory or yung memory na kailangan mo para kailangan mo alalahanin kung ano ba yung sagot dun sa exam mo. So bakit pa? Paano ba natin siya makakalimutan? Paano mo ba siya makakalimutan? paano ka ba makakawala ng mga iyong memorya or memory? Forgetting is surprisingly common event. Kaya minsan nakakalimutan natin na meron palang assignment. Ma'am, sorry po, nakalimutan ko po. Ma'am, sorry po, ganito, ganyan, ganyan. But lagi natin nagagawa yun kasi it's a very common event. So why do we forget information? Bakit pa natin nakakalimutan yung mga natutunan na natin from the previous nating mga lessons? Ito yung mga basic kung bakit nakakalimutan nyo sila. Una, you fail to store. Hindi mo kasi talaga inintend na i-store sila sa long-term memory. Nanatili sila sa short-term memory at sila'y nawala pagkatapos ng ilang segundo. Pangalawa, interference. Hindi ka kasi nag-attend fully on the formation of the memory. Motivated forgetting, talagang ginusto mong kalimutan, at retrieval failure. Minsan sa sobrang kaba, kaya nag-fail. So dun sa failure to store, ako nung college ako may ginagawa ako. Pag kailangan ko talagang aralin. Kasi meron kami noon tinatawag na subject. Isang subject namin is perception. Puro perception lang talaga. As in, kailangan naming ikwento via an essay kung paano nakikita, kumare, nakikita tong computer na to or tong cellphone na to, yung shape, saan pupunta, yung color, saan pupuntang parte ng utak, yung dimension, yung depth, and yung kung ano-ano pa, saan pupuntang parte ng utak, paano nakita yon, paano yung pumunta sa optic nerve and things like that. So, ang ginagawa ko noon is, magbabasa ako, magme-memorize ako. Pag sumakit na yung ulo ko, naramdaman ko na yung sakit ng ulo, matutulog ako. And then, pag natulog ako, I'll see to it na nanaginip ako. Kasi pag nanaginip ka na, yun yung part ng sleep mo na tinatawag na REM or Rapid Eye Movement. Kapag nananaginip ka na, kahit pag pinanood yun na yung Inside Out, you will appreciate this. Pero pag nanaginip ka na, that is the moment na nag-i-store na yung mga memory o yung mga information from short term na de-deliver na sila papunta dun sa mga storage mo sa long term memory. So, kumbaga, kapag nanaginip ka, may i-store sila. Ma'am, bakit di po ako nananaginip? Bakit hindi ko po maalala na nananaginip ako? Kasi possibly na mali yung gising mo. Kumbaga, hindi, kasi ako na-train ko yung sarili ko. I'm very aware when I have dreams. So, kumbaga, talagang naaalala ko yung mga panaginip ko, maikukwento ko yung panaginip ko. Kasi alam ko, aware ako, na-train ko yung sarili ko. Pero it is actually impossible for a person na hindi siya nananaginip. Possibly lang na hindi siya nagigising dun sa tamang stage ng sleep, kaya hindi niya naaalala yung kanyang panaginip. So, chika lang yon. Interference, yun nga. Kasi nga, hindi ka naman talaga nakikinig. Paano mo maaalala kung hindi mo naman talaga ginustong alalahanin? Pangatlo is motivated forgetting, 'di ba? Yung gusto mo kasi talagang kalimutan siya, kaya you are motivated na binura mo lahat talaga ng pictures, binura mo yung number niya, yan, may nasasaktan na, yan. And retrieval failure. Kapag nag-e-exam ka, the more na kinakabahan ka, the more na mataas yung anxiety mo, mas mahihirapan makarating ang impormasyon from the long-term memory to the short-term memory. Kaya, chill lang pag nag-e-exam. Key. So, punta na tayo sa katalinuhan or intelligence. Ano ba yung intelligence? Intelligence involves some different mental abilities such as logic, reasoning, problem solving, and planning. While the subject of intelligence is one of the largest and most heavily researched, it's also one of the topics that generates the greatest controversy. Kasi nga, daming sinasabi nila na hindi naman masusukat yung katalinuhan pag magaling ka mag-English. Hindi naman masusukat yung katalinuhan pag mataas yung grade mo. Ang dami ko kayang kilala na mataas yung grade, hindi naman sila talaga matalino. So, kaya marami siyang controversy. So, let's talk about it. Yung term na IQ or intelligent quotient was first coined in the 20th century by a German psychologist named William Stern. Si William Stern, yun siya. Siya yung nagsabi ng IQ. So, yung formula ng IQ, siya yung gumawa nun. And then, on the later part of the 20th century, si Alfred Binet naman developed the very first IQ test para ma-help yung French government sa mga school children. So, si Binet was the first to introduce the concept of mental age or set of abilities that children of certain age must possess or yung milestone na tinatawag natin. Then, meron tayong different na theories about intelligence. Una is yung kay Charles Spearman, which is the general intelligence. So, general intelligence or the G factor. So, after using the technique known as the factor analysis to examine some mental aptitude tests, si Spearman concluded that scores on this test were remarkably similar. So, makikita mo kung meron tayong bell curve, yung mga scores ng mga tao, nandoon sila sa bandang gitna nung curve. Ibig sabihin, yung mga tao, on average, magkakapareho sila ng talino. Pero merong mga tao na nandoon sa may mga percentile, which is yung manipis, yung mga score. Ibig sabihin, kokonti lang yung mga taong ganun yung talino. Next is yung primary mental abilities by Louis L. Turnstone. So, si Turnstone naman, ang sabi niya, instead of viewing intelligence as single general ability, Turnstone theory focus on 7 different mental abilities. So, may 7 abilities siya na sinabi sa primary mental abilities. Una is yung associative memory, yung ability natin to memorize and recall, numerical ability, to solve mathematics, no? Yan, marami nasasaktan dyan. Perceptual speed, to see difference and similarities among objects, yung alin na naiba, yan. Reasoning, the ability to find rules. Spatial visualization, ability to visualize relationship. Verbal comprehension, the ability to define and understand words. And word fluency, or the ability to produce words rapidly, tulad ng ginagawa ko ngayon. And then next, after that is yung theory of multiple intelligence. Ito yung pinakasikat, yung kay Howard Gardner theory of multiple intelligence. According to Gardner, he proposed that the traditional idea of IQ or intelligence based on IQ tested did not fully or accurately depict a person's ability. Kasi according to his theory, may 8 different intelligences. So, based on the skills and abilities that values in different cultures. So, tignan natin baka alin kaya dito yung katalinuhan mo. First is bodily kinesthetic. Ito yung mga tao na kaya nilang kontrolin yung movement na kanilang katawan and handle objects skillfully. Hindi nakakabasag ng pinggan. So, yung lang palang hindi ka nakakabasag ng pinggan, nakakabagsak ng plato, hindi ka nabubunggo basta-basta. Intelligence na yun according to Gardner. Next is interpersonal intelligence. Capacity to detect and respond appropriately to the moods and motivation and desires of others. So, yung interpersonal, it means kung paano ka makisama sa mga tao. Pag marunong ka makisama, marunong ka makibagay, meron ka mataas na interpersonal intelligence. So, matalino ka pa din. Next is intrapersonal, meaning the capacity to be self-aware, in tune with the inner feeling, values, beliefs, and thinking process. Yung gaano mo kakilala yung sarili mo is also an intelligence. Next is logical mathematical intelligence, which is the ability to think conceptually and abstractively, the capacity to discern logically and numerical patterns. So, kung magaling ka sa math, magaling ka sa logic, therefore, mataas yung logical mathematical intelligence mo. Next is musical intelligence, yung magaling kang mag-appreciate mag-produce at mag-appreciate. Kasi maraming tao magaling lang mag-appreciate pero hindi marunong mag-produce ng rhythms, pitch, and timbre. And then next is naturalistic intelligence, which is the ability to recognize, categorize animals, plants, and other objects. So pag pumunta ka, yung baka ba sa'yo at saka yung carabao, pareho lang. Ibig sabihin, medyo mababa yung naturalistic intelligence. Next is yung verbal linguistic intelligence, which is yung well-developed verbal skills and sensitivity to sounds, meaning, and rhythms of words. And yung visual spatial intelligence, which is yung magaling kang mag-imagine kapag may nakita ka na picture, nai-imagine mo kaagad and accurately yung isang bagay. So, meron din si Sternberg, which is a triarchic theory of intelligence, which is defined as the mental activity directed towards purposive adaptation to selection, shaping, and real-world environment relevant to oneself. So, ito yung mga triarchic. Analytical, creative, and practical. So, pag analytical ka, you have the ability to evaluate information and solve problem. Creative, yung cope up with new ideas. And practical is to adapt to the changing environment. So, let's move on to section 2, human learning. Sa section na to, we want to explain the learning process, discuss the factor that influence the learning process, and apply principle of learning to your academic life. So, ano ba yung learning? Learning can be defined in many ways, but most psychologists would agree that it is relatively permanent change in behavior that result from experience. So, kapag ikaw ay hindi nagbabago kahit ulit-ulit nang nangyayari sa'yo, therefore, sabi ng psychologist, walang learning na nangyari. During the first half of the 20th century, the school of thought known as behaviorism rose to dominate the psychology and so to explain learning process. So meron tatlong major type of learning described in the behavioral psychology. So kanina cognitive psychology, ngayon behavioral psychology naman. First is the classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. So let's go to behaviorism first. Behaviorism was the school of thought in psychology that sought to measure only observable behavior. So si John B. Watson outlined his seminal 1913 paper, Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It. The behaviorist standpoint held that psychology was an experimental and objective science and that internal mental processes should not be considered because they could not be directly observed and measured. So according to behaviorism, pag di mo nakikita, hindi mo ma-measure, therefore, hindi siya pwedeng science. So yan. Ang um, pinakasikat na experiment ni John B. Watson, which is also very controversial, is si Little Albert. Si Little Albert, kwento ko lang sa inyo, ay anak ng kanyang sekretarya. Ngayon, gusto nilang malaman kung yung bata ba ay madedevelop nila yung takot ng bata sa mga white rat. So, ganito yung ginawa nila. Ito naman nanay na to, kakaiba din siya. To. Talagang hinayaan niya yung anak niya na pag-experimentan nitong si John B. Watson. So, edi, kuwari may baby, mga toddler lang, 4 years old lang si Little Albert. Every time na papakita sa kanya yung white rat, magpapakalembang sila ng malakas na sound, tapos iiyak si Little Albert. So, ang nangyari, parang akala tuloy ng bata, na-learn ng bata, na every time nalilitaw yung white rat, magkakaroon ng malakas na sound. So, umiiyak na siya. Up until that time na papakita lang yung white rat, iiyak na yung bata. Traumatic na sa kanya. At ito pa, lahat na ng white, pati white rabbit, pati yung balbas ni Santa Claus, lahat na lang ng white na furry object, umiiyak yung bata. Therefore, nagkaroon ng learning na traumatic dun sa bata. At ang masakit at masaklap dito, si Little Albert, hindi siya naging normal paglaki niya. Dahil nga dun sa ginawa sa kanya ng nanay niya at yung boss ng nanay niya. So ngayon, hindi na yan ginagawa sa psychology. Pero controversial siya. Pero at the same time, maraming natutunan dahil dun sa mga experiment na ganon. So, let's go first dun sa classical conditioning. Si Ivan Pavlov, hindi siya psychologist. Actually, ang pinag-aaralan talaga nila is yung salivation ng dog. Pero, dahil dun sa experiment nila, dun sa paano yung digestion ng dog, na-discover nila is another paradigm of psychology. So, classical conditioning is a learning process in which an association is made between a previously neutral stimulus, yung wala namang kinalaman, at the stimulus that naturally evoke a response. So for example, in Pavlov's classical experiment, the smell of food was the naturally occurring stimulus that was paired with previously neutral ringing of bell. Kaya na-realize niyo ba na yung mga aso ninyo, ay yung mga pets ninyo, nakakarinig pa lang sila ng mga plato, nagkakalampagang plato, feeling nila eating time na kasi nagkaroon ng conditioning. So, eating time is a naturally occurring stimulus kasi syempre kapag pagkain, may-excite yung mga animals. Pero, yung kalampag, pwede man naghuhugas ka lang ng plato or yung plato is a neutral stimulus wherein hindi naman talaga siya dapat na-prepare doon. Pero dahil sa pairing, dahil sa classical conditioning, na-associate nila yung dalawa. Therefore, mag-lead yun into a response which is yung salivation. Okay, nagets niyo ba? Kumbaga ganito lang yan. Dati yung kantang ito, example yung theme song ninyo, di ba? Yung theme song mo ng ex mo. Nung dati, wala namang talagang kirot sa'yo yung song na yon. Parang kumbaga, okay, maganda yung kanta, pero siyempre kinanta niya sa'yo or naging theme song ninyo. Ngayon yan, nung una, nung kayo pa, kinikilig ka. So yung neutral stimulus is yung tinatawag nating kanta and yung natural is yung kilig. So kumbaga, neutral, pinakinig yung kanta, so kinikilig ka kasi nga siyempre inalay sa'yo yung kanta, so therefore kinikilig ka. Kaso nung nag-break kayo, ang nangyari baliktad na. So yung kanta na dating kinikilig ka, ngayon naiinis ka na kasi naaalala mo yung ex mo. So yun tinatawag nating classical conditioning. Next is yung operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a learning process in which the probability of a response occurring is increased or decreasing due to the reinforcement or punishment. So ito ay first studied by Edward Thorndike yung sa mga pigeon. And then later by B.F. Skinner, the underlying idea between operant conditioning is the consequence of our action shape voluntary behavior. So kaya hindi mo na inulit yung isang bagay kasi na napagalitan ka or kaya nung bata ka gusto mo nakaka-perfect ka kasi binibigyan ka nila ng Jollibee tapos nabibigyan ka ng star. I mean, binibigyan ka ng star tapos dahil dun sa star, nagkakaroon ka ng reward. So yun sinasabi ng operant conditioning, reward and punishment. According to Skinner, so yung reinforcement can lead to increase of behavior. Pag reinforce mo, mag-i-increase yung behavior. Pag pinunish mo naman, magre-result yun sa decrease. He also found out that the timing of the reinforcement, it's either lagi mo siyang ginagawa or hindi, yun yung magiging dahilan kung strong ba yung response. So yung scheduling ng reinforcement, yung sinasabi natin dito. Ito yung ginagamit ng mga dog trainer, kaya yung mga aso naman, like si Milo, ang galing-galing niya, operant conditioning yung tinatawag doon. So, pag nagagawa niya yung sit, or roll over, or bark, yung things like ganon, tapos binibigyan siya ng treats, nag-i-increase yung behavior. So, parang nalilearn ng aso na, kapag pala nag-bark ako, pag sinabi niya na bark, nag-bark ako, therefore, nag-i-increase yung behavior, sa isip niya, bibigyan ako ng treats. So, ganun yung operant conditioning. So, observational learning na tayo. So, ito yung pangatlo. Observational learning is a process in which learning occurs through observing or imitating others. Albert Bandura, social learning theory, suggests that in addition to learning through conditioning, people also learn through observing and imitating the action of others. So, kaya nga yung mga batang babae, madalas yung ating model is yung ating mga magulang, yung ating nanay. Kaya nga, ang nangyayari, di ba, nung bata tayo, anong laro natin? Observational learning. Luto-lutuan, nanay-nanayan, di ba? Teacher-teacheran, yung mga lalaki naman. On the other hand, kung ano yung ginagawa ng tatay nila, yun din yung ginagawa nila. Kasi you are imitating yung iyong mga magulang. So, yun is according to Albert Bandura. So, hindi mo kailangan ma-experience yung isang bagay para lang matutunan. Minsan, nakita mo napalo siya kasi ginawa niya yon. So, therefore, hindi mo na siya gagawin kasi kung magaling ka sa observational learning. Okay, so ano yung mga learning strategies? Ano yung mga pwede ninyong gawin para mas maging magaling kayo sa inyong pag-aaral? Una, take down notes. Ako natutuwa ako sa subject na to. Marami ako nakikita sa inyo na nagti-take down notes kahit hindi naman ako mag-check ng notes, but it's for their own safety. And then, creating cognitive maps. So, ako kasi visual learner ako. So, later on, we will be discussing this. Magbibigay ako sa inyo ng isang link ng Google exam and then you will learn kung anong klaseng learner kayo. So ako kasi visual learner ako, very effective sa akin yung cognitive map. Pag nag-exam ako, effective yung visualization kapag nag-exam ako kung saan tinuro ng teacher or ng professor namin yung subject na yon. Kasi nai-imagine ko kung saan niya tinuro yon, saan niya sinulat yon, anong ginoke niya nun, anong suot din teacher namin nung tinuro niya yon. So, nagkakaroon ako ng ganon. And then, engaging in collaborative learning, yon. Pwede kayong mag-group study, wag lang kayo mag-group cheating, di ba? Yan. Going beyond the mandatory course requirement. So, pwede naman na magbasa tayo, manood tayo. Hindi lang yung kung ano lang yung binigay sa inyo. Kung gusto mo talagang matuto ng isang bagay, kumbaga, syempre ito, this is just a minor subject. Pero on your major subjects, highly encouraging you na go beyond kung ano man yung binibigay or mandatory na binibigay ng teachers ninyo. If you want to be an expert sa isang bagay, alam nyo, you need to devote at least 2 hours of your time daily. So in 1 year, I'll tell you, you will be an expert. So, yun yung pwede ninyong gawin. Okay, so that will be the end of our discussion. So your assignment will be first, you need to make a movie review. First, watch Inside Out. Then, make a movie review based on our discussion dun sa memory and also dun sa intelligence based on the book. And then next is I will be posting a Google form or Google quiz so that you would know kung ano yung inyong learning style. Tapos, i-discuss natin yon sa ating next meeting para matutunan ninyo kung anong learning styles ninyo. Okay? So, thank you so much for your time and see you sa ating synchronous class. Bye-bye!